talking about culture in relation to manhood, and we're also going to be talking about.
We're going to be talking about mentorship and how important it is in the journey of being a man. We have two incredible guests here with us today. We have Bab'Zwane, which we are so Star Trek a little bit after our conversation, and we have almost a product of the work of his hands, which is Manqoba, which is his mentee. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I think I'll just go straight into it because um, the biggest reason why we wanted to start this conversation is we wanted to create that safe space for men, right? To share their stories and hopefully to connect with what we are discussing here today, and hopefully heal, think about something differently, see it from a different perspective. So I'll start with you, Bab'Zwane. Paint for us a picture of what it was like being a 10-year-old Bab'Zwane before you were a Bab'Zwane. What were the kind of influences around manhood that you saw? Yeah, just paint a picture for us about your childhood in relation to manhood.
Well, hopefully I won't disappoint you about that, because when I grew up in deep in the apartheid era, where the focus on us was mostly being ready to tackle apartheid and fight apartheid. So we were brought up in an era where probably the issue of manhood was not a subject that was spoken about. The issue was, what are we going to do with these white guys? that was the biggest issue. So all I remember is, as a young person, you were almost like being mentally made ready to deal with whiteness rather than deal with anything else. It was just whiteness, football, your dress, the music, but the main focus was whiteness. So the recognition of manhood was a far-fetched subject at the time when I grew up.
I remember in our conversation you also mentioned that the household you grew up in almost was genderless, in the sense that it wasn't a traditional Zulu home. Everyone just unpack that a little bit.
I mean, put it like this: we're the Tswana family opposite our house, and the Bele family, Swazi family, and we were Zulu. So, what tribe you were was of no material in Guatemala. Okay, it was unlike in other townships where you had the Sotho section, Zulu section. In Guatemala, it's just a mixed bowl. Okay, so Zuluness was not an issue. I didn't connect with my Zuluness at all at that time. All I connected with was the people around me. And as I said, the household I grew up in, because my parents were teachers, cousins from places where schools were difficult to access lived with us. So being of the same age meant we were very competitive. Everybody had this thing, a turn to do something. So if it was dishwashing, it was your turn today, it was his turn tomorrow, it was my turn the day after. So it was never that because she is a girl, she does that. Because you're a boy, you don't do that. So everybody got a turn. So turn to scrap the pot, put the pot for pub. That's what you did. You made the fire. Everybody got a turn. And as I said, we had a big stoop outside our house, which we used to go on in knees and polish, but everyone had a turn.
I see.
Yeah, it was never our sister's jobs or our brother's job. Everybody had a turn. To feed the dog, somebody also had a turn.
And then who were your male influences? Like for example, myself, we would look up at the guys who had nice cars and who dressed a certain way, and you're a young boy going, I want to be like him. Were there any sort of those influences as you're?
Yeah, I can think of many. For instance, one of the major influences were soccer players. I mean, we were quite fond of them because they were part of the entertainment. But as I alluded, the guys who we hero worshipped were guys who could put the first one against whites.
I see.
If you got to know that this guy does that in town, and then he's recognized as a clever.
Okay.
If you can get away with stuff with whites, that was the guys that we admired.
So it wasn't the guys with the most women or the guys, Abo Shellington. We call it Abo Shellington.
No, I would say that's something that I realized when I was much older. When at my age, soccer players and the wise guys, the sharp guys, as we call them, guys who could pull something against whites. Those were the kids in town. Yeah.
So it sounds like, Bab'Zwane, I know you also mentioned that Black consciousness was a big part of the environment that you found yourself in. Hence, you're saying those that could pull the first one, the white
Exactly.
were,
Yeah.
and that you were mostly confronted with your blackness more than your maleness.
I mean, if I give an example, in 1961 or 1960, when what was then the Union of South Africa became the Republic of South Africa, the white guys went to all the primary schools. They gave us nice little pins with a coin written Republic of South Africa, and we were given the flags. And I mean, we were kids, maybe the age of your daughter, and we were running out with these flags. But we were stopped by guys at the civic center, and they took those flags and bent them. I remember getting home crying and saying, they stole my flag. And my parents asked me what flag, and I had no idea what flag. I just knew that we had flags that we were given, but mine didn't last more than an hour, because as soon as we got out of school, there were these guys who were collecting them and burning them. So I would say, even though one wasn't confronted with the serious side of Black consciousness, but one was immediately faced with the issue that it was on your face. You couldn't get away from it. Yeah.
So in a way, Black consciousness molded your manhood, so to speak.
Yeah, that is why I said the issue of maleness and womenness was not such a prominent thing.
Yes, it was about liberation.
It was more about the struggle.
Yes.
Even though we didn't know what was the struggle, but it was the struggle. So we learned to say the struggle, not knowing what the struggle was about.
I see. And then on your side, what would you say influenced you early on in your youth? Like that young man, what were your male influences? What sort of drove your idea of manhood?
My dad, Bab'Zwane, and then becoming a teenager was then the whole discovering of the hip-hop culture, where I'm now going into that. It's so weird how he speaks about the struggle that he was having, but it was about facing apartheid. I am now a result of, it's 1991, let's get along. That's now I'm coming into that system. And I'm coming into the system of, I'm amongst the first Black kids going into a white school when I was going into Southwood Primary. I'm amongst the first batch that's going in there. So now we've been told, let's get along. So now it's now finding my feet there from primary right up into high school, where you uhlale eKasi, but you go to a white school, you know. So eKasi, you're no longer that black enough to hang out with some of the gents, but in the white school, you're also too black. So now it's finding your balance and where do I kind of belong, which is now where in high school I'm saying that now I'm coming into now the hip hop culture where the guys at school they like that, even in class. And now I'm at a point where hip hop is not vernacular yet, it's still English. So in class, you've got the guys who are trying to learn English if they're not going to white schools. They're listening to the music, they're into the culture. So now I'm starting to mix with those guys because now I'm finding, okay, so this is where I kind of belong. You know, at school I'm cool, and not like us, I'm cool. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm being raised in. And then again, my male figures that I'm watching, literally, I've got Bab'Zwane and my father, who's now late. These are the two. I'm not sure if I can say juxtaposition because they were good friends, very good friends, but they're also two very different people. So I'm seeing both sides as I'm growing up. I've got another friend, Usaz. His dad is another guy, Usipundimandi. He's another guy that I'm looking at, who's at home with his family. I think I was saying to you the other day that the one thing that was happening, that I'll make it like a statistic. I'll even think about my own friends. Like about 5 of us, my dad has left home. My one friend, his father passed early. My other friend, his dad left. And then another one, he feels that his dad is there physically, but not like as a father. So we've all got different situations in the father thing. And then out of that 5, like I'm mentioning, maybe 2 of them, their fathers are home on a constant level. So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing my friends' fathers who are still at home. I'm seeing him, and then there's my father as well. So those are my male figures as I'm growing up.
How do you think that shaped the man that you are today, include hip hop, the influence that hip hop had? Because you mentioned that hip hop became this outlet for you, and in this kind of place of refuge or a space of refuge that you realize looking around, a lot of young men your age didn't really have, and as a result got into other things.
It was like Tupac said once, because like his dad wasn't around, he was like, through this culture, through this music, LL had to be my dad, Cool G Rap had to be my dad. Like these other guys are now becoming your father figures, and they older, the guys that you're listening to. So that's now where I'm getting a lot of influence from. So I'm looking at them as father figures. But now at the same time, they are still young men, if you get what I'm saying. So now that's where now he's also coming into the picture. I'm not even sure if you'll remember. There's this one time we were still delivering the ice cream.
Yes, yeah.
I think Besindlula, Ansaz of Besindlula Alex or Besindlula Group. And he says to me, in your life, this is what you need to avoid. You see this poverty around you. Do you see all this? He's like, this is your future unless you change. Know this. He says to me in the car as we're driving, know that jail was built for a black man. It was built for you. If you don't change your life, and he put it as blankly as this, that you will get arrested, they will rape you in jail, you will come back depressed with whatever issues, and you will die. That will be your future. If you're not serious about your life, know that's what's going to happen to you. As we're driving, we're even seeing kids, in the squatter camps. He's like, this is part of the poverty cycle. You end up reproducing kids at a young age, and the cycle is continuing. Unless you change your life, this is your future. Oh no, it scared me good and proper. Like, it scared me good, good and proper.
Who I taught school 77, the guy we went to church with, there's a guy that we went to church with, I spoke to this guy, and exactly the same thing happened, because when we were at school, he was one of the naughtiest guys. Okay, and I spoke to him, and he then worked for the council. And then, whilst he was working for the council, I think they did some funny things. Got arrested. He went to Modapi and he was given 6-year sentence in Modapi. He got raped. He came out of Modapi. He had HIV and he died. And that's the total sum of his story. So I mean, it's not an unrelated event. And like I was saying, the apartheid setup was close to the guys who were poor and the guys who were poorly educated. But to those of us who were lucky to have gone to school, you already knew what the system was doing. When we finished primary school, we had to go to high school. And our parents could afford to take us to high school. But the system of apartheid was such that they didn't provide senior secondary schooling in the townships. They wanted us to go to the tribal villages. Like Zulus had to go to Zululand, Xhosas would go to the Transkei, Sutus to Kwakwa, and the other tribes to the northern. Remember, there's a whole system of apartheid was no black belongs here. We all belong to our tribal places. But we knew that. So by the time we were on the trains going to Zululand, we already knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to make us Zulus by force. So which means you are now confronting a culture which you have already rejected on your way there. So when you get there and the guys tell us, no, Tina, we Zulus are like this, you already reject that because you know this is what apartheid wants you to do. But now if you take a guy who is not conscientized, he gets there, he becomes that product. But he doesn't know how he has become that product because he was not aware that that is what the system wants him to be. They want him to be the proud Zulu in the textbook. You know, and I go there and I resent the proud Zulu in the textbook because I know the proud Zulu in the textbook also carries a pass at the same time. You know, how proud can you be with your passport, which tells you where you must stay and where you can go and where you cannot go.
To ask, with unmanned, the idea is to just look at, like, unpack and unmask that relationship between men and society, and also unlearn some of these things that you are speaking about that, you know, people buy into but they don't know. Because I'm a product of that. I grew up thinking a man is this thing, I go out in the world, pump my chest, I'm a man. You know, as a man, if another man crosses you in a certain way, you are taught not to, you don't walk away. You know, to indoor Ifa on his shield or something like that. Within that space now, you are rejecting these things. I'm sure you are not praised for rejecting them. I'm sure people did not clap hands. Like, how then, as a young man, did you then navigate that? Because I'm sure the conditioning of society sometimes it's kind of a dictatorship. It's very hard for you to decide to walk the other way when everyone is going that other way.
Well, I would say, for instance, in Zululand, we were called Ikomfan because we spoke this colloquial language, which had a bit of Afrikaans. So they used to call us Ikomfan because when we spoke, we would say, the Komfan Josie Af. So that's why Ikomfan. So we were rejected as a group to start off with. So we were not even part of the group. So we were a group of rejects. Also remember, we're now coming to a society which thinks we should be proud of being who they are. And I come with my exposure to the politics of the time, and I know that they are not aware of what the system is playing at them. And like I said to you, there was no influence on me on manhood at that stage. My only influence started when I started falling in love. You know, that's the only time where I then had this dichotomy of maleness versus femaleness. Because I now had a girlfriend who I loved very dearly. And as I said, I almost knew this was going to be my life partner. And the only person that I could relate to, whose values I could trust, was my mother. And that's the person who I went to. Contrary to all other, black or tribal behaviors, I didn't speak to my peers. I spoke to my mother and said, I've got this girl that I love. I learned about manhood from my mother, and not from another man.
In terms of today's world, you see, we are struggling, not only in South Africa, but I think it's becoming an issue across Africa and even in America, of gender-based violence. And I think with Unmen, that's what inspired it. The cause of this mostly is men. And so we just wanted to understand from your view, from having experienced life in the 50s until today, what would you attribute this to? Is this a new thing that just started happening now, or is it only being exposed or put on the spotlight now?
Yeah, like I was saying, that I've always seen a life from the perspective of the people who were exposed and the people who were not exposed. And my understanding, as I would say, as a person who I think I was exposed, I understood that the whole system had ingrained in it that masculinity by totally ignoring the female, of saying there's a permit system which belongs to the man of the house. In fact, in the apartheid system, you couldn't even access a house unless you were married, if you were a woman. And once the man accesses the house, he becomes the permit holder, and you become a dependent with all the children. So that was institutionalized. If you were conscious, you saw what the system was doing. But if you were not, you were just a product of the system. So to me, the entrenching of the policy or the advent of gender-based violence was a result, to me, was a result of that. And when I saw it, to me, it seemed like an outcome of something. It didn't seem like, men have just decided to be wild on women.
Violent, DJ, all of us.
Yeah, it seemed to me as an outcome. But I'm conscious of the fact that in other areas there are attributable reasons for it. But from my perspective, where I was, I thought that is what apartheid gave us.
So what you're saying, that is that, patriarchy and toxic masculinity, as we are experiencing it, has its roots in the policies of apartheid.
In my opinion, it came from there, because that's what created the proud Zulu or the proud Xhosa, or who then found it easy to associate with those patriarchy traits. Yes. Whereas, as I said at the beginning, because I rejected that, it was easy for me to stand back and say, Exactly. I knew this was going to be the outcome.
Wow. And on your side, Q, like, how would you? I mean, if you were to see yourself today and see yourself maybe when you were younger, what would you attribute this thing of gender-based violence to? Is it that in those days it existed, but it wasn't really paid much attention, or is it in today's world it's just so bad and worse?
I think it has always been there. I think it's not something which maybe I'm not sure if it's gotten worse or better. That's the one thing I'm not sure. What I am sure of is that there's more light on it. People have camera phones now. People have social media. So now there's as soon as a guy were to hit you now, you can immediately pop out your phone or whatever the case might be. I don't think that was the case back then. But what he's also saying, I think we're also having the conversation is that we spoke of something as simple as your father maybe who doesn't hug you kind of thing. And I think I was saying to you that what I have now realized is that what was my father going through, like he's saying the results of apartheid. I've asked myself quite a lot. It's just he's no longer alive to answer the questions, but I have asked myself, Uguti, psychologically, the things that have now happened to him, what is that? What was going through his mind, which made him think that maybe if I do this, this is actually okay. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a case of that right now. It's just something that is more, it's more highlighted. Again, because of our technology, because of social medias, but it's carrying on. It's sad. I think it's still very. I thought it would be better with our generation, but I don't think it is.
I want to quickly read actually the definition of toxic masculinity, because I thought I knew what it was. Or it's very easy to say toxic masculinity is GBV or a violent outburst towards another person. But I found this interesting, and let me read and then I'll have my question. So toxic masculinity is described as a set of behaviors and beliefs that include the following: suppressing emotions or masking distress, maintaining an appearance of hardness, and violence as an indicator of power. So with that in mind, have you either felt like you didn't have the space to say, I need help because society expects me to be a certain way? And I'm posing this question to both. Or have you seen the results of when your friends feel like they don't have the space to say, I'm actually drowning. I don't know what to do, and having to mask their emotions. We always have this discussion that we feel like patriarchy, all of this, at the end of the day, dehumanizes men. It asks them to be something that they are not, as in you're not allowed to have the space to express your emotions. That's inhumane. We're human beings that were built to express emotions and to connect. So if you can, with the definition in mind, share with us an instance where either you've seen what that looks like or the results of that, or where you found yourself having to be confronted with, I'm no longer going to participate in masking my emotions or masking distress.
With your dad, we were playing. He was playing me his records, and we were listening to this jazz, because you remember we used to listen to jazz together. And he was playing a certain track, and I said, I've got this vinyl, but mine has a crack in this. And he says, it's got a scratch. I said, yeah, it's got a scratch. Timby made a scratch, meaning my wife made a scratch. He said, do you give your wife your vinyls? And I said, yeah, dude, what do you mean? I mean, we each play, it's the sound we like. He says, oh, never. I'd never give my vinyl. That's when you suddenly wake up to the fact that really I've gone soft. And handing my vinyls without my permission. And here's a guy who's shocked out of his mind. Like, you allow your wife to access your vinyls. You know, and to me, that expression just suddenly woke me up to something. And I realized that, okay, maybe we're in completely different paths. You know, although I wouldn't have articulated it as toxic masculinity, but suddenly I realized that here's a guy saying to me, "You've gone soft," and I can't defend that. You know, that's the only example I can think of. That it's something that just came to my mind, of being told that I'd gone soft.
You whipped. I remember hearing that a lot. What are you doing? No, you whip now. You know, like, and so you have this, and I think once you accept that, actually I am whipped. I'm fine. I think that's where you find your happiness and you find your comfortability. That no, I'm actually okay with that. You know, because again, like you're saying, I think the outlet as young men, we don't have outlets. You know, again, which is why I love the music part of hip hop and whatnot. Like we had our outlets. You know. Even if you're gonna go sit and write a song or whatever, but you've got an outlet. Not everyone has an outlet.
Or their outlets are drinking.
Or you will find an outlet. I think that's even the best way to put it. That if you're not conscious of your outlet, you will find one some way, somehow.
And you're unconscious about it at times.
You know, yeah. And then that's where now you're going to put it out. Like the word therapy, that's not a word that gets thrown, even Manqoba. That's not a word that gets thrown around.
It was a swear word. Someone
yeah.
At school, we would say, hey, when we need a psychologist or therapy or whatever.
So you
are emotional.
Yeah. I was just watching, there's an episode, what's the series? The Wife. I was watching it with my wife. And there's this one episode, like guys have been killed, so there's been a slaughtering at a wedding. And then the one guy who's the husband now, he's acting out of place. And his wife is like, and this guy loses it. You know, like and he's literally at the windows, like and he's lighting the cigarette. Therapy.
Trauma he
you know what I'm saying?
experienced.
He just watched people getting killed.
He definitely did that.
And he's telling his wife, yeah, and he literally puts it like that. And I'm thinking to myself, and that was a thing. Therapy. So again, just normalizing therapy amongst our brothers, even sisters, in fact, as a whole. I think it's extremely important. You know what I'm saying?
We all need to have that.
We're all dealing with trauma of some sort, you know, from growing up or.
And unfortunately, so many people think that you can suppress. I used to be off that mold where I would use sex or alcohol to suppress having to deal with an issue. And I realized that with young men, when I look back, that was our life in your mid 20s. It's just suppress. And so when you start getting into relationships, like I've been in relationships where if like my wife was to interview one of the ladies I dated, like she would be like she's talking about someone else because I was not a good human being. And unfortunately, sometimes as well, you are lucky that there's a thing, Bab'Zwane. for many young men trying to figure it out. There's someone who's in the same hole as you, and the advice you give each other
From the hole.
Yeah.
Advice full of holes, basically.
it's bad stuff. Like it's really. I mean, some of the advice I got from my friends got me serious.
I get you.
Hot water.
I was in hot water.
But I think the worst part is if a person is a product of a system and they are that way. When you try and come across to them to say, but there's another way of looking at things, they look at you and think you need therapy. You know, because as I say, his dad was my friend, so he would confront me with things, and when I say no, but there's another way, and he'd say, yeah, but when you can't talk because you've gone very slow.
You're a non-starter.
Yeah, so I was of no help to him, and he's the guy that I could have imparted some of the of my
Awareness.
thinking,
Yeah.
yes, to him, but he had rejected me in total because, as far as he was concerned, I was just too soft.
And just
You know?
to hop on what you're saying, that the soft side that's been so villainized, as in men are not allowed to
Yes.
lean into those soft skills.
Yeah.
What have you seen amongst your peers has been the result of rejecting that more emotional soft side of being a human being in general?
Well, you know, most guys have become so soft that they're actually not so unsoft that they are hard of hearing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a guy can't even hear you
Punchline.
when you're saying, you know, but that's stupid what you're doing.
Ah.
You know, they can't even hear that.
So he's so hard that he can't even hear.
Yeah.
No, he can't, yeah.
He's out of
But
here.
what does his life look like?
Is his life?
What
No,
his
but
relationships
that's why
like?
I'm calling him out, because what he's doing is out of line. But the guy is so hard of hearing that he's not hearing what you are saying.
He's destroying this side. He's destroying his family. He's destroying
Exactly.
his relationship. But
Alienating things, you know, and doing all sorts of things. And you're trying to say to him, no, dude, but, and he says, nah, no, not you. When I know your track record. But you know what I liked about my friend was that at some stage he'll say, I think you were right. You know, but it's
years later.
years later and it's very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
Very rare. Let's go to Timber, you were right. And I think, damn.
But now so much damage has been done.
So much has happened, and you see.
What I've seen from the older fathers that were, for the older guys, the guys, like you're saying, who are now soft. I mean, for me, those are the guys that are still so at home with their families. Again, when I'm just thinking about my friend Usaz, his dad, he says, I don't even know if you know Musipondi man.
Yeah.
He was quite a hard man. Like when you really get down and you describe him in his younger years, he was a really hard. He's got all these stab wounds even on his chest. He would, you know.
Stab wounds.
But Usaz would tell me that seeing someone he loves very dearly being killed, he saw that I need to change, you know, and he became a softer man. He was at home with his family. So for me, that's what I saw. The guys who are now set in their ways and set in being hard are not at home with their families. Because you know, it's that mentality, you know, and it again, when you get to see from both, you see, this is not working out as well as you think it will. Why is this guy not at home with his family, and why is this guy at home with his family? That's me personally. Those are the questions I would ask myself.
And where would you say the self-love element falls in there? Because I think we had a chat about self-love. And it was so funny how Bab'Zwane reacted.
What did he say?
Like, I reject that violently.
Maybe
What did he say?
the description,
The
though,
description
the
is what he was
description,
rejecting.
and now that we've gotten to know Bab'Zwane,
Yeah.
the description was very westernized,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
it was very much about just looking out for yourself only.
Yes.
Okay.
Whereas in the Ubuntu version of self-love says
Muntu ngabantu. Oh.
that you feel yourself, you love yourself, so that you are able to be generous enough to give. So
That's
the
deep.
problem is that the description of self-love was
That's
from
deep.
a white
Was
perspective.
from a very Western perspective,
That's
because
deep.
it was saying that
Yeah.
you need to
Look for self. Look out for self.
self first.
Yes.
Above all
First,
else.
above all else. And
Ah.
I think from the conversation, that's why
Yeah.
I'm bringing it back to say
Yeah.
that, what would you say right now? Say if maybe we take away the thing, the description.
Mhm.
When you hear self-love, what does that mean to you?
It's being okay with the person that you are, mistakes and all. Loving that person and be like being okay. You would see, I'm not, I don't know, I'm not as smart as the next guy, or maybe I'm not a man who's good with his hands. You know, like there's a general perception that guys must be good with their hands. For me, I think it's being okay and being happy with who you are. That's how I think of it, and also not falling, like with guys, for example, we'll work ourselves to the bone to provide for our families. It's okay to rest.
That's why we included the self-love piece, because or the self-love, self-awareness piece, because we feel that is actually at the root cause of a lot of GBV and other interactions that are toxic between us. So Wenetata, on your side, how have you seen, having self-awareness, having a love for yourself so that you can give to your family as a benefit to you and your family?
A lot of people were not upset because they meant to be upset. They were just a product of a very violent system. And that had separated families, or that had created these men who had these mental attitudes. And it was too late to go and reshape the men. So you just step into the system. And where you can help, you help. That is what mentorship to me has meant.
In terms of
Yeah.
consciousness and
Yeah.
the way that maybe my people from my generation
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah.
We see people who also claim to be from that time,
Yes.
but the words that you've said, they don't align with some of these people we see who
Yeah.
are leaders in community, and
Yes.
their behaviors don't speak to
Yes.
what
Yeah.
you are saying. Yes.
Well, I think that's easy for me to understand, because as we were being conscientized, I think some guys were conscientized into office, or into thinking of office, or thinking of politics as such. But I understood that the system was going to produce a kind of a person. So some of the guys that I would look at and listen to, I could say to myself, yeah, I know we went to the same school with him, but he can't help himself. He's just a product of a system that he didn't understand that it was so sophisticated. He's just an outcome of that system. And bear no grudge for him, because he's just a product of that system.
You used a powerful word. He's a victim. of the
Exactly.
system.
He's the victim of that system. And he stands there and he says, I'm going to lead you. And I understand right in my gut that he has no leadership qualities in as far as the whole broad spectrum of people are, because people have to be led in every part of their lives.
Yes.
So, Manqoba, Can you talk to us about how Bab'Zwane then stood in that gap or came in to kind of fill that gap for you?
Weird enough, first and foremost, before I even dive deep into it, I gotta give him his flowers and just say thank you and I love you, brother. Like, I love you, man, so much for everything that you've literally done in my life. Again, my father. We had our problems, we had our issues, and I know he was also going through his own things. I love him. I also love him and respect him. So now, while those things were happening and were going on, he's the guy who stepped in and started showing me how to kind of approach life and being a man. You know, he would do it consciously and I think even unconsciously. Right now, as a product of a lot that he's done, and I've told myself it's like a proper mission. I know I've got a giving heart. I do want to give. But in my life, I'm actually on a mission to give more than this guy has. Like, it's one of my main goals. I've seen him. I went to film school because he was my mom fighting tooth and nail. She wanted me to go to varsity and she succeeded. He's one of the reasons why I was also able to go to varsity. I've seen him take other people to school. I've seen him say, because he owned a business which is a petrol station. I've seen him say to me, I don't want someone here working for me for 20 years. Like, it doesn't make sense. I want you to grow. And if you have that love and that interest, he will step in and do what he can. So within my own life, I've tried to do that. When I stayed in Melville in front of a school, if I'd see kids who are still chilling after school or whatnot, come here, what can I do for you? At that same school, I've seen there's kids who've been maybe transport has left them behind. Something as simple as that, where I've had to drive to like Soweto, somewhere where I don't know, to go drop off a kid, you know. And in my head, I'm like, I know he would do the very same thing even in my shoes because I've seen that, you know. So I'm a product of that, knowing Yoguti, I must give. When I would look at him growing up, to me, giving seemed like something you must do. It's not like a choice kind of thing. You must do it. Because I saw him giving all the time. Like, all the time. Sometimes it's not even something physical like money or whatnot, but the advice that he would give someone, you know. So he guided me a lot in that regard. As a younger man, I was in a position to really hate my father, to really hate. In fact, I'm gonna put this as when I was in matric, and I want to go to film school. I want to go to AFDA. I hadn't spoken to my father. He and I probably hadn't spoken in about 4 or 5 years or so. I don't have money to go to AFDA. I'm with him. We drive. I don't know. I can't remember where we're driving to, and he says to me, "I want to help you. I want to help you get to AFDA." I'm like, "Okay, great." So I'm going to AFDA. But like he's like, "No, but there's a condition." I'm like, "Flip, he's gonna want me to pay him back or something." And he said to me, "The only thing I want from you is to fix things with your father. That's the only condition." So I'm like, "Flip." I'm like, "Dude, I haven't spoken to this guy in a long time."
Pay you back.
Actually, to tell the honest truth, I would actually rather pay him back. And he said, "If you fix things, no Samson, I'm gonna help you go to AFDA." I had to go to him, you know, and I'm in a position where I feel like he must come to me. That's how angry I was at that. But I went to him. We sat and we spoke, and afterwards, I was like, "Yo, what he did was huge."
But I think more than anything, Manqoba, what I really appreciated was how you actually understood where he came from. Because to me, in the end, here was this friend of mine who was just a victim of a system, and he was doing nothing else but just being what the victim would be like. And here is this youngster who has no perspective of why this guy is like this. Why is he not like that?
Yeah.
And all I can do is come in and say, we're all victims here.
I think as a closing, yeah, no, I felt that. I think also because I've gone to school with Manqoba, I've known Manqoba almost for 20 years now. You know, to hear that, I can see physically the evolution of the seed that you've planted.
Okay.
You know, we are living evidence of that, just sitting in this room and Mad Show being a business that exists. Those are the seeds that you've planted. So you are very correct to say that the footprint of of fathering goes far beyond my sperm, or the footprint of my sperm. So in closing, if you could advise your younger selves, if you could give the young man versions of yourselves any advice, what would that be?
If you don't mind me going first,
Go.
I would say, if I could go back to my 18 or 17 or 16 or 15-year-old person, I would say I wish I was more aware of the world than the world that I was captured in of apartheid. I really wish that younger people have an opportunity to see the world before they make up their mind about themselves. Because the first time I went to Botswana and saw a 7-year-old child play, it actually moved me to tears. And I was already working, I was 26 at that time. And I thought, here's a kid who has been free since they were born. And I don't know what to say to her. She's in her own country. She's whoever life has meant her to be. No one has been channeling her to be a certain product. And here I am at 26, a survivor of a very harsh system that was channeling me to be that. And, I wish I had known people in Botswana, in Lesotho, in Zimbabwe, people who were free, to just understand how they dealt with life. We were these channel people, we were supposed to fight apartheid. And your mindset was just about that. Yes, girls are there, they're fun. Football is there, it's fun. Movies are there, it's fun. But be careful of Tarzan. Because he's talking about blacks. That's the kind of upbringing that I had.
What did I tell my younger self? I would tell me, younger me, that it's not as bad as you think it is. It's okay. And I'd also say it's okay to be scared, but go ahead and do it. It's okay to be scared. You're supposed to be scared, but go ahead and do it. It's going to be okay. It will be okay.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think from my side here, the beauty I've experienced is that authenticity. And I think the story of men lacks that. A lot of us go around wearing masks, pretending, and we let our ego drive who we are. And so it's so beautiful to just have an honest conversation, allow ourselves to be vulnerable, I think is the right word. And I'm hoping that through sharing, we can also show someone out there that it's okay.
Thank you again, everyone, for sharing your precious stories. We consider stories to be very precious, so thank you for sharing them. And let's go back to Shannon Pam, where we'll be unpacking this episode even deeper and see really what are the real gems and practical tools that other people can use to heal, grow, evolve.
The problem is not just gender-based violence or apartheid. The problem is violence, and we need to address that. And also, when we look at any challenge in a society, we need to understand it systemically. And we know that there is a link between unemployment and less education and violence in general. And so one of the ways that we can help to heal and to move forward is to address some of those systemic challenges. Another way is to create support groups so that those who are survivors of violence have a place to be seen, have a place to process the trauma. And then finally, to create education around how to hold boundaries, education around what healthy masculinity is, what healthy femininity is, so that we create a desired way of being that is clear, and education around where to get help if you are a survivor of violence. Self-love describes any action which supports physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being and growth. So it would include good nutrition, good sort of exercise, rest, as well as even deep breathing. These are all self-love practices, but self-love also includes protecting ourselves. And when we experience abuse, or when we are a survivor of violence, what can happen in those situations is that we abandon ourselves. We can abandon ourselves to try to make it comfortable for someone else. We can abandon ourselves to try to please someone else. And when we abandon ourselves, we make ourselves more vulnerable to violence. So one of the ways that we can combat or reverse or reduce violence is to help people, to help ourselves and others to understand what self-care really looks like, and how we can stay present with ourselves, how we can hold boundaries, and how we can protect ourselves. So we know that it's not only the victims of violence that suffer. The perpetrators of violence also suffer. Hurt people hurt people. It's very rare to find an abuser or a persecutor who has not themselves been a victim of violence. So self-care is so important all round. You know, those of us that take deep care of ourselves and make sure that our needs are met are less likely to be frustrated, are less likely to be triggered into extreme anger, are less likely to act out in violent ways. So self-care is really important across the board. And often acts of violence can be followed by extreme feelings of guilt and shame, which can create a cycle. In order not to feel that guilt and shame, there can be more acting out and more acting out. So self-love is also about knowing sometimes we've done the best we could with what we knew how. We had role models in our past that taught us how to deal with situations in a way that's not so effective. And we're learning and growing. You know, if you are one of those people that are struggling with anger, to know that there are places to go to learn how to better process those emotions and to be kind with yourself in the learning of those processes.